Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today we'll be talking and discussing my favorite film of all time, Twister. So I'm kind of known in the chasing community as a Twister obsessed nutcase, I guess, which is fine. I'm not going to deny it because, I mean, if you look behind me, I love tornadoes, and that has stemmed from Twister. And Twister is a very fun movie for me, and in the chasing community I think it's very well beloved, but I just happen to love it more than some people. So I think this will be fun for me to talk about because I haven't actually addressed my love for Twister in a video before, or in a direct way anyway. So we kind of have a lot to go through, and I wasn't sure exactly how I wanted to do this review, so I have an outline here, and hopefully this will make things easier for me to get my thoughts out in a very coherent way. So without further ado, we'll jump right into it. So Twister follows a group of storm chasers who want to deploy pods named Dorothy, which is displayed nicely on my shirt here. Deploy Dorothy in front of tornadoes, and they release sensors that look like this into the tornado to relay back information about the internal structure to them. And with this information, they'll be able to make better warning systems to save more lives, which I think is the basic premise of Twister. I mean, there's a little bit more that goes on, but that's the general main plot. And I think Twister is a movie that's stood the test of time. It's a film that storm chasers and meteorologists can really relate to, and it's a movie that has changed the field forever. I mean, if you look at the interest for meteorology before Twister and after Twister, I mean, the numbers rise astronomically. Or, I mean, I don't know if there's any data that supports that, but in my mind and the way that people talk about Twister, I think that's kind of a fair statement to make. So the plot, I think, is really fun because it's based off of reality. Dorothy is based off of a real tornado probe that the National Severe Storms Laboratory in Norman, Oklahoma came up with, called TOTO, which stands for the TOTO Tornado Observatory. And it basically had the same functions that Dorothy had. The only real difference is that Dorothy was made to be drawn up into the tornado itself, but TOTO was made to stay firm on the ground, and it had instruments attached to it that would record the variables inside the tornado and store it in the container.
Okay, that's good. Okay, deploy. Let's go. I got the thing. Deploy. Okay, get this thing up here. You got this? We have the hook. Yes, it's off. Let's go. Be careful now. Come on. Got on the ramp. Everybody on the ramps? It's on the ramp? All right. Watch the face. Yeah.
This has got to face to the north. Turn it on.
Okay. No, Mike. Look at north.
The TOTO project was really difficult, and it was, I guess, kind of deemed a failure, even though many people have duplicated that same type of project, and with very successful outcomes, which goes to people like Tim Samaras and Josh Warman at the Center for Severe Weather Research. And we've learned so much about tornadoes since Twister was made, thanks to projects like Vortex and Vortex 2, which takes these concepts from Twister and brings it into the real world. So that's kind of cool, I feel like. Now, the characters of Twister are iconic to the storm chasing community, especially to me. I can't go on a storm chase without mentioning Twister or saying a line from Twister at all. I think every storm chase there's some Twister reference in there somewhere. The first character I want to talk about is Joe. And Twister is really centered on Joe's character because she was traumatized as a child because she saw her father die in a tornado in kind of a violent, scary fashion. But I don't know if anyone's done any type of psychological study of Joe as a character, but I think she suffers from some type of PTSD. I'm not a psychologist, so I could be completely wrong. But the way she acts in the future, as we see her in the film, is she's very obsessed with getting Dorothy into the tornado. Like, that's her life's goal. And she'll do anything at all to make it happen. And that's put a strain on her marriage with Bill, which is really sad because you really root for them, even though they have a very dysfunctional relationship. Because you know and you can tell that Joe loves Bill very much. But she can't fully commit to their marriage because her obsession with getting this information from tornadoes is like crucial to saving lives. We have Bill, who is Joe's husband, or soon to be ex-husband, and he is just a regular guy who is a meteorologist and loves tornadoes and loves meteorology.
I'll be mad later, right down, trying not to kill us.
But that's not his entire life. And he can't be in this marriage with Joe because he feels like she's not even there with him. So he moves on with his fiancée, Melissa, who's played by Jamie Gertz. And by the time we get to the end portion of the movie, Bill has really gone through this kind of arc of like just wanting to get away from Joe forever and get away from this Dorothy project so he can just live a normal life. But by the end, like, he's seen so much in the film from tornadoes that he knows how important this project is, and like Joe, they really bond on getting this project accomplished. And once again, will do anything to get that information, including sacrificing his beautiful red Dodge pickup. Sadness. And then we have Bill's fiancée, Melissa, who I don't have a lot of strong feelings about. She's kind of an annoying character. But we have to have a character like her who doesn't know anything about meteorology to be a vessel for people who are not in the know about meteorology, to learn some things and to explain the plot so people can follow it. That's basically all she's there for, and I don't have any strong opinions about her. And then we have Dusty, who is played by the late Philip Seymour Hoffman, who is arguably the most iconic character in Twister. I think storm chasers that I know especially, really identify with his character just because he's really crazy. And I think out of everyone in the film, he's the more realistic embodiment of what a storm chaser is. And he's just such a fun character. I mean, I love him too. I have a quote from him tattooed on me. So I think he's great, and such a fun character. I love him so much. We have the rest of the crew, which don't play a real big role in the film. I mean, you have Rabbit, who's played by Alan Rickman, who is kind of their guide to get them from point A to point B and how to maneuver through the storms. He is really funny. And then everyone else is just kind of forgettable. I really like Belter. Personally, I don't know who plays him, but he's like a toned down version of Dusty, which I think is more like me on an actual storm chase. So I really identify with Belter, even though his role is pretty non-existent in the movie. And then I don't really need to talk about anyone else just because no one else really has a role except to be part of Joe's team. That's basically all it is. So next I'm going to talk about the special effects because when people talk about Twister in the entertainment industry, they really hone in on the special effects because at the time they were super groundbreaking. There's never been a tornado film quite like this before, to where you can have realistic looking tornadoes that are made from computers. Because I mean, we go back to The Wizard of Oz back in the 1930s, which I still think is the most realistic looking tornado of any movie ever, which was made out of a windsock, to where Twister, you have a realistic looking computer generated tornado, which really is saying something because you have films like Into the Storm, which I really dislike, which is a more modern tornado film which came out I think a couple years ago, and the tornadoes in that movie are very stupid looking in my opinion. They all look the same, this like really grayscale atypical tornado. It's kind of hard to describe how much I don't like that movie. But Twister made all the tornadoes look different. They all have personality, they all have different characteristics, which I think is important because tornadoes are like that. They don't look the same. And with the computer graphics, they were able to really bring these tornadoes to life in a realistic fashion that has stood the test of time. And people still marvel at the special effects in that movie because they're pretty incredible. And with a movie like Twister, like, you had to have a lot of debris. Like, debris is like the bread and butter of Twister because there's a lot of like ridiculous type of scenes that involve debris. And it's pretty constant. Anytime there's a tornado around, it's just throwing everything around. You got tractors falling out of the sky, you got semis, you got cows, and all of these types of small debris like shingles and 2x4s. It's just a constant rain of debris, which they had like special people that handled all of that. And I think it really adds to the movie, even though, I mean, tornadoes have debris, obviously, but a lot of times tornadoes don't have so much debris. And I think Twister is a dramatization of what tornadoes actually do. But I think it really adds a fun element to the movie, and it's really interesting to look at, especially in contrast to seeing the CGI tornado, and then you have all the real debris that's raining on top of our characters and flying past their heads. Then you have the wind machines that they used, which involved giant box fans, and they also use jet engines. So blowing on the actors, they'll experience winds of like 50 miles per hour. And then when they're doing like big scenes that involve a lot of debris, that's when they'll use the jet engines, which throw debris in a high speed manner, and it just looks really cool. I love that they use so much debris. Like I said, it just makes it more fun. So I have quite a few favorite scenes. My two favorite scenes are the very first tornado scene, which is really over the top, but it's so cool because like it's the first tornado that we actually see in the film. So they really went all out by having this like smaller looking tornado really pack a punch by blowing through barns, and then you have Joe and Bill and Joe's Jeep going into the ditch. and they can't get out of the ditch. So it's like, oh my god, what's going to happen to them? The one thing that annoys me about that scene, and it's not that anything in the scene in particular, but I listened to the audio commentary with the director Jan de Bont, and he has said that that tornado was supposed to be an F1, which is completely ridiculous if you see that movie. And if you watch that scene, that tornado was definitely stronger than an F1. But, I mean, Twister movie logic, I guess. And then my other favorite scene is the entire F5 sequence. Because if you know me at all, my main fascination with tornadoes stems from the violent tornadoes, which are your EF4s and EF5s. So that's really like my interest, and I think Twister really did a good job with capturing the intensity that comes from and witnessing an EF5 tornado, because the tornado in the movie is like a mile wide, and it has so much debris, and you could just feel the power of it, especially in a movie theater. I've seen Twister in theaters twice now, and each time that the F5 sequence happens, I'm just in awe, because the sounds, also, I forgot to mention the sounds. The sounds are phenomenal. Like, the sound engineering in this movie is spot on. Each tornado's roar is different. They took animal sounds and slowed them down and lowered their pitch to get this tornado growl, which tornadoes do not make that sound. But it adds, like I said, personality to the tornadoes, and I just think it's super cool. And the roar, especially for the F5, is really big. I think that's the only way I can describe it. And I think it just adds to the complexity of how intense F5 tornadoes actually are, especially when you compare that to the end sequence of Into the Storm, which I think the F5 in that movie is very lackluster. It doesn't pack the same punch as the F5 in Twister does. And then the very last 10 minutes of the movie where Joe and Bill have to run away from the F5 really showcases the power of a tornado like that. And in real life, I mean, Joe and Bill, they would never be able to outrun an F5 or a tornado in general on foot. And with as much debris as that F5 had, there's no way they would have escaped that. But, I mean, movie logic. But since we're right there with the characters, we get to experience the high winds and all the debris and the power that comes from this tornado. And it's something that I really appreciated, and I think it's something that a lot of people really connected with, because it's like, wow, like, this is a force of nature that actually happens, and stuff like this actually happens. Like, that's crazy. And I think when it comes down to it, that's what Twister actually does. It makes us really respect the power of nature, and being able to see that stuff in real life, because Twister did a lot of things right. And in tornado videos and stuff now, and with pictures, you're able to see tornado patterns that were replicated in Twister and be like, wow, that's really cool. And a lot of that comes from the F5 stuff, for me anyway, because at the end of the movie, when the credits start rolling, there's this wide angle shot of the tornado damage path, and you can see that there are swirls in the damage path, cycloidal ground markings, I couldn't think of the word for a second, and they actually went through the cornfield and smashed it to make it look like a multiple vortex wedge tornado went through there. And you're able to see that in real life too. The way they do that is so much fun for me, and I think it just adds more to Twister being a great film, because they tried to be as realistic as possible. So I also want to talk about the legacy that Twister left, because like I said, it changed the meteorology and storm chasing field forever. You had so many people get brought into this hobby that, like, yes, these forces of nature exist, but there's people that actually get in their cars and chase them. Like, to a lot of people that was unfathomable, but then they see Twister and they're like, wow, like, people actually do this? I want to do that. And I mean, that could go both ways. It could be good or bad, depending on who you talk to. But for someone like me, I saw Twister for the first time when I was like 2. And I've been really fascinated with the wind up until then. But Twister is like a really intense wind phenomenon, so, and it's really beautiful and dramatic to look at. And so I really honed in on the physical features of a tornado first. And once I got into more tornado documentaries as a kid, that really solidified that, like, tornadoes are these really super powerful and super beautiful and super dangerous things that actually exist. And I want to study them for the rest of my life because I love them so much. And that's translated to now. I mean, I'm planning on getting my master's in geography to study tornado effects on society. Well, that's the plan. We'll see how that goes in the future. But, like, I want to help people protect themselves and be able to be knowledgeable to save their lives. And that came from Twister, because that was the whole point of Twister to begin with. And that's something I really honed in on. And I love this movie so much. To kind of start wrapping this video up, I kind of wanted to go through an article written by my good friends over at Tornado Talk, which is an amazing resource for tornado enthusiasts. They have an article of fact-checking things that occurred in Twister, and I think it would be fun to go through a few of these. I'll leave the link for the full article in the description box, so you can go check them out there. So one cool thing is that while Joe and Belter are working on their radar, Joe asked for a sector scan west-northwest and to look at mid-levels of rotation and increase the PRF. The PRF, which stands for pulse repetition frequency, is the frequency at which pulses are emitted from the Doppler radar. If the PRF is high, the Doppler radar has less time to sample precipitation and/or rain at further distances. However, the supercell, which was real in the movie, which I think was filmed from Vortex, the Vortex Armada themselves, was close to them, so it is operationally correct to increase the PRF, as it also increases the velocity range. So that's a really cool fun fact. Another cool one is that while talking about Dorothy to the crew, they state how if they successfully deploy, they will be able to understand some of the complex dynamics involved within tornadoes and to increase warning time to 15 minutes. In real life, this was successfully carried out for the first time in history in South Dakota in 2003. There have been other successful deployments of in situ instruments being very closely impacted by tornadoes that have been carried out by other field missions. So I kind of touched on this earlier, that other projects that are related, or like Dorothy and TOTO and things like that, were successful later on in the years. Mostly from Tim Samaras. He's really the one that has done like groundbreaking stuff with his tornado probes. And this one is a very special one, and if you're watching this, this goes out to a very specific person, so I hope you're watching this. But Bill mentions to Dusty that the sky is going green. A green luminescence within clouds has nothing to do with an indication of a tornado. Rather, is indicative of a hail core, as the sunlight that percolates through the clouds is refracted through the hailstones, giving a greenish-bluish tint to the clouds. Clowns? Clouds. And that's an inside joke for me and another person. And the last one, it kind of goes to something I talked about a little bit earlier. But the first tornado obliterates a barn, and why can't I talk? This kind of goes back to something I talked about earlier, but the first tornado obliterates a barn and 2 grain bins. The size of a tornado in real life is not an indicator of its strength, which is something that happens a lot through the film. But there have been cases of EF4 and EF5 tornadoes that have a rope or stovepipe structure to it. Hashtag Gerald, hashtag Eli Monotobia, and I'm sure there's others that I just can't think of right now, but it's happened a lot. So to wrap this up, I love Twister. It's the greatest weather movie out there. If you disagree with me, then you're wrong. And it's been one of the biggest influences in my life, if not the biggest influence from the entertainment industry in my life. It just means a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to you guys too. So if you made it this far, I'm really happy. And if you have any comments or feelings or critiques, I guess, leave them in the comments below. And if there's anything in particular you want me to talk about in a future video, please leave a comment for that too. I think I'm gonna go now. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Bye.